Okay, so we're gonna start. Happy Chanukah. Thank you, Nechama and Simcha Chai for being here. We're gonna start. This sikha is Chafdalad Kislev. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Chafdalad Kislev. No, I'm doing the wrong one. Shabbos Parshas Miketz, which is the 6th day of Hanukkah. Erev Rish Chodesh Teves Tavshin and Beis. So, the Chiddush, and I think this kind of goes back to our conversation, the Chiddush of Hanukkah that's different than all the other Yom Tovim is that all the other Yom Tovim, we celebrate by Seudah, so it means we have to wash, we eat bread and meat and wine, and it's all like around the celebrating of like the Yom Tov with like the 3-course meal and this and that and like the menus and all that. And that's how we celebrate Pesach and Purim and Sukkot, right? Like all these Yom Tovim, we celebrate them like this, all surrounded around the meal, the Seudah. And Hanukkah is Ella. It's not doesn't have like a Mishra and Simcha and all that, but we celebrate and we thank Hashem and we celebrate all of that with Hallel and thanking Hashem and Hadlakas Haneres, right? So everything is around the candles. So there's like snacks and you can have donuts and you have this and that, but everything is around the candles, not around the meal. So the Rabbi explains, what does it mean? Okay, so because the Ness of Hanukkah, the Nitzachon Neged HaYevanim was, what would they want? Lashkicham tarasecha ulahavira mechuke ritzanecha. Nitzachon Ruchni, right? Which means that the Yevanim wanted the Bnei Israel to forget the Torah, your Torah, and to remove, right, like the chukim, right, which means that this was a spiritual war, and because of everything that happened, and even then they were saved, Baruchnias. So obviously that's very different than, let's say, Xeris Haman, who wanted to destroy the Jewish bodies, and wanted to, destroy the Jewish bodies, and the Yevanim didn't want that. So I'm just gonna say this next ice base outside, and then we'll start with ice gimel inside. Basically, that obviously everything in Yiddishkeit is Gashmis and Ruchnias, right? Because like we still on Shabbos we have to celebrate by Taino again, by eating, and Yom Tov same thing. Like we're supposed to celebrate with eating and celebrating and having beautiful clothes and beautiful dishes and flowers and all that. Which means that there's a very strong connection between the physical and the spiritual across the board every day of our lives. But there's something very special about Hanukkah that is much more spiritually focused. Even like on the candle, like Ner Mitzvah V'Tar. So there's something very, very specific and very special about Hanukkah. By the way, even if there was a Hatzal B'Gashmias for the during Hanukkah, there's something very special. So here, I'm going to start with Ice Gimel, if anyone's following along. V'yuvam b'hektim habir b'technam haruchni shel anyanim hagashmiyim shebehem nikvu hayem tevim lechem u'mayim b'yayin b'sudas shebechol hayem tevim v'shemen badlakas neres Hanukkah. So we basically have two categories. We have lechem, mayim, yayin, right? That we have water, bread, water, wine that we have during Yom Tovim, and then we have shemen, which is what's the center of the celebration of Hanukkah. Yidush lechem u'mayim shemen reizim al dargas shit and shines b'tara lechem u'mayim reimzim al nigla b'tara yayin remez al razin nistar shabbatara the shemen remez al razin to razin shabbatara. So we have 3 different levels. So basically, all these things represent different levels of different levels in Torah, right? Lechem u'mayim is like negla, right? Yayin is Razin, right? The secrets of the Torah, and Shemin is Razin de Razin, Shabbat Torah. So it's the secrets of the Torah, right? So we have like, let's say, Tanakh, Gemara, Mishnah, all that, and then we have like the secrets. You have and then we have the secrets of the secrets. So we're gonna just break this down a little bit here, continuing to break down this idea of bread, water, wine, oil. So bread and water are essential for the existence of a person, right? If somebody wants to live, if somebody he needs the sustenance of bread and water, l'kiyam adam, to be able to exist, to exist and to keep somebody alive, and then whereas wine and oil have a different idea, where wine brings pleasure, joy, and pleasure, right? So no, I'm sorry. Wine is lahisif chayes simcha. It adds life, and simcha, and wine and oil adds tainug. Okay, so nigla tera. So let's just give some examples here. Kol dine hatara benina aser v'amotar hatame v'atar kevan shemochach lekiyam hamitzvahs leide asamaisa asher yasan ve'ela asher laisa sena nimshal lachomim shemochacham lekiyam adam. So in nigla we have halachas. This you can't do. This you could do. This you must do. This you whatever. These are like very specific things that a person has to abide by. So that's a person has to eat water, has to drink water, has to eat bread, has to do, just like you have to drink water, you have to do these certain mitzvahs. You're not allowed to do these certain things. Okay. So that's just like the basic, I guess, like if you look at like the Maslow's, triangle of like needs, right? So that's kind of the bottom essential piece of it. Vinista de Terra, my separation has a Markava, Pardes, Yedias Elikus, Shaides, and the test of Chas, Tanig became a mitzvah with our the year, Kwashika Das Elke Avicha, Abdu Balav Shalom, Nimshal, Liain, Vishamich, and Masibum Chas Tanig. So the idea of wine and oil is that Das Elke Avicha, once we learn who Hashem is, right? We learn about the Pardes, which is the pardes, that going in and learning more about who Hashem is, and thank you. Once you are more understanding of who Hashem is and all the details of it, then it adds chayas and tainug, it adds life and it adds pleasure to the actual kiyam mitzvahs, because through the love and fear of Hashem. So now we understand we have this umbrella of wine and oil. Both the wine and the oil have access a deeper, more essential, pleasurable, exciting, life-giving, life-brightening, kind of like bringing everything to like a higher plane of experience, bringing our experience to a higher level. But then, so that's the general idea. But then more specifically, what's the difference between wine and water? Wine and oil, because wine is razin de terra and oil is razin de razin. So let's talk about the two differences. Not the differences, what they are more specifically. Yayin, what's wine? Anybody want to do you want to guess what the difference is? Anyone? What are you feeling? Okay. Let's just look inside then. Yayin, af she'ene mukhrach lekiyam ha'adam, shalachein shtiyase ene b'diras k'may mayim. ולחם כי אם בזמנים מיוחדים שניטס בצריך מיוחד ביין, הרי בזמנים מיוחדים אלא שייסם עשה בתור משקה בפני עצמי. ואדרבה שם בפני עצמי מזק לאדם, אלא מערבים ממנו בשאר מאכלם ורק tippin bavad. Okay. So wine, it's not something that we need. Like you can't drink wine like water because you need water. You don't necessarily need wine, but there are certain times that there is a specific need for wine, right? What are those times? Like we have to drink wine on Shabbos, Yom Tov, things like that. So that's something that is a specific need. But this is really interesting. Oil, you can't drink. Okay, it adds tainug, it adds pleasure, but you can't drink it. There are other ways you can consume oil that would bring pleasure, but if you mix it with something, or if you fry something in it, or whatever, mix it with a different food, and so you can't just drink. I mean, I think there's like a thing of like people drink like olive oil. I don't know, but you can't drink it. So how does this apply to Nista de Terra, to the hidden parts of Torah? Sheyayin raimes al rasin de Torah sheshaychem legiloi k'may hayayin shebezman miyuchadim nishtamshim b'betar mashka v'shemen raimes al rasin de rasin shebetar shalomayla megiloi k'may shemen she'enei ra'oi l'shtia b'fnei atzmai ki im arbe tippin mimenai b'sech machal acher. Wow. Okay, so wine is compared to the hidden part of Torah, but it's the hidden part of Torah that's shayach, that has some sort of connection, that has some sort of similar language to Giloi, right? To revelation. There is something that is able for the wine to be, for the wine part of the Torah, the resin, the secrets of the Torah to be revealed. There's some sort of bridge, there's some sort of common language, at least there's a way to translate it into revelation, into Giloi, right? Because even like we do drink wine at certain times, but when we talk about oil, which is resin to resin, the secrets of the Torah, that is above any sort of Giloi. That means that there's no real bridge, there's no real common language, there's no real like connection with the resin to resin of the Torah to this world, to the revealed world. Just like oil is not able to be drunk, yeah, by itself, because if it's drank by itself, it can actually hurt a person. The secrets of the Torah, the oil part of the Torah, must be a tiny drop, needs to be mixed in with other foods to be able to be consumed. Wow. Yesh levar techen achidush v'hamayla d'imei Chanukah. Okay, so now how does this connect back to Chanukah? Legabe shar yom tovim shalei kiv lemishta v'simcha k'shar yom tovim ela lahal ulahida aydei lakas neres blizkar neis hashemen kivan shachanukah kasher shemen shebetarah resin deresin shalman resin stam yayin shebetarah v'alachas kam v'kam l'mayla minigla detarah mayim v'lechem shebetarah mitzad gadol ma'alosay light nikva l'mishcha v'simcha aydei suda v'lachol mayim. So therefore, like, because we understand this, we can understand what's the kidush of Chanukah, that we don't eat and we don't drink in the same way. We don't have meals like we do by other Yom Tovim. The only thing is that we sing Hallel and we thank Hashem, and that is all expressed through the lighting of the candles, not through eating, not through parties, not through any of that, not through a lot of guests and tablescapes and whatever, which I guess people do on Hanukkah anyway. But Why? Because it's connected to the Razin Derazin of the Torah. And it's way, way, way above regular Razin, regular secrets. It's way, way, way higher than that, higher than wine. And it's obviously much, much, how much more so, higher than Nigla of Torah, right? It's much, 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 much higher than the wine, than the bread and the water, which is the nigla of Torah. And I actually just thinking about like what happens when you have a pot of hot oil and you splash water by mistake. Big mistake, right? So I just like to visualize like how they're so different, how the experiences are just so incredibly different. And not, I'm sorry, not experience, their essence and their makeup and their chemistry, right? It's totally different. So we are going to have a question here. So we need to understand something here with the connection of Chanukah to Shemen Shabbatara. Chanukah Yom Tov midivrei Seifrim, uvizman based by its sheni, uvimatzav yared, kishamda machaz yavan harasha al amcha Yisrael ashkichem tarasecha v'chula. ואיך ייתכן שדווקא חנוכה הוא היום טוב היחידי מבין כל היום טובים שקשר עם שמן שבתורה רזן שבתורה. So yeah, Hanukkah, there's two pieces. The Hanukkah, first of all, is from B'divrei Seifrim, which means it's a Derabanim, which means it's not from the Torah, it's from the Rabbanim that established it. And it was also during a time that was such a low point for Bnei Israel. They were actually under the rule of Yavan, right? Under the Greek Empire, Yavan Harasha, and his goal was for them to forget the Torah. And so how is Hanukkah, if this is like the foundation of Hanukkah, right? Yavan, second, and by Sheni. So it's like all, like everything against it. It's not, obviously we know that the idea that spirituality during the second Beis Hamikdash was much lower than any other time in, if you compare it to David or Shlomo or the times of the Mishkan, the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, totally, totally different. And this is the time, the only Yontif in the entire year that's connected with Shemen of Torah. How's that possible? ונקודת הביר בזה שהסדר דהשכלה סתרה שניתנה לעשות שלום בעולם הוא באופן שככל הילך שההילך ומסגבר החשך בעולם, הילך ומסגבר גם בהשכלה סתרה, Torah art. So how the Torah answers this in very, very short, that the way that the Torah is revealed, the Seder deheskala Torah, right? What's the Torah was given to bring shalom in the world, right? So there was a specific evolution of how the Torah is given to bring more and more and more shalom into this world. What is this way? That it gets stronger, and so as as the darkness in the world is progressively getting darker and darker and greater and more intense, at that same time, the revelation of the Torah to a higher and more greater degree gets also grown, like equally. So the darkness gets darker and thicker and scarier and sadder and more intense and more painful. And at that same time, the Torah is also getting more and more and more and more and more revealed. Torah are. Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful. I'm excited.
While you were teaching, this is what came out. The moon, right? So it's the feminine,
yeah,
and how it's illuminating the whole world.
Yeah, and it's also the darkness because all I see is the black right now. And that's yeah, wow. Just now in 10 minutes?
Yeah, while you were teaching, this is what came up.
Wow.
Chaya, can you explain it? I want to hear more.
Oh, I want to connect it to the Dvar Malchus. So maybe after Hani teaches, right? I don't want to interrupt her. I just wanted to. This is what came out from her teaching. Yeah, go ahead. I'll say it after. I'll share after if there's time.
Yes. So we're gonna go for like another like 15 minutes. Oh, actually no. Whatever, something like that. Okay. Yeah, so basically as the darkness, and I noticed in your painting, as the darkness gets more and more and more dark, the Hashem brings more revelation of Torah to the world. Because there was such a great Yerida, it was such a low point for the entire Jewish people. They were literally standing, Yavan was standing on the Bnei Israel, right? They were totally in control. There was a need for a much greater overcoming of the light of Torah through so such a low experience, such a low reality called for such a high revelation of Hashem and of the Torah, Hashem through the Torah, which is Shem and Shabbat Torah, Raz and Shabbat Torah, right? So let's explain it a little more.
Honey, question.
Yes.
In what way? On my video. In what way was Yavan's darkness darker than like other darkness throughout history?
Well, this is specifically speaking about. I think that's a great question. Well, if you want to compare it to like, let's say the times of David.
Okay.
The times of Shlomo, like David and Shlomo were like, Shlomo's like was like the peak, right? And then they built the Beis Hamikdash and each Tachas Gafnai, and like there was incredible revelation of Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash, the first Beis Hamikdash. The second Beis Hamikdash had a lot less light. There was a lot of the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash that were not there, and we know that the second Beis Hamikdash there was a lot less light, and a lot less. I guess there was less light in the traditional sense of the word, which means comparing to the first Beis Hamikdash, but obviously as we're learning, the light was much greater. And this is actually towards the end. Towards the end of the story of Chanukah. I mean, the story of Chanukah was pretty close to the Chorban of the Bayis Sheni also. And then there was all this politics with the leaders and the Kahanim, and like it was a mess. Yeah, so compare it to that. If you want to compare it to today, that's a different thing. I don't know how to do that. But the idea that the times, yeah, if you learn any part of like that history of anything around the story of Hanukkah was so like terrible.
Like all the decrees and stuff like that.
Yeah, but even just like in the Jewish community, it was not a great, the
very dark spiritually.
Yeah, it was a very dark time. The Kahanim and the leadership in general, like yeah, I never liked learning that because it just
so sad, right?
Yeah, very, very, very sad, very heartbreaking. And at that same time, we're saying that in all this, Shemen is revealed, and that's the time for it. So, yeah. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, totally. So then, how do we see? Now, the next question is, how do we see that the depth of Torah came out at that time? Is it just like a spiritual fact that the Rebbe is telling us?
No, we'll definitely get to that. I don't know how much like hopefully we'll get to part of it. Well, the idea is that the theme of Hanukkah is oil, and oil represents Rezin Torah.
Okay.
And Hanukkah is the only holiday that we celebrate in this way. All other holidays we celebrate with a feast, with washing, with meat, with wine, with water, right? Like all these aspects that represent the other parts of Torah. So we know that there's something extra special, and it's specifically connected to this Yom Tov, so we have to do something. So I'm going to continue here. Thank you for asking. Be'er hadvarim yedua שהיוונים הם בחינת חכמה דקליפה וחכמה חיצונית בזמן ההוא היו פילוסופים המכחישים בנבואה ולכן תמו כל השמנים גם בחינת חכמה דקדושה שרצו להשגיחם תרסך וכו'. So we'll just get even the Yevanim, the Greeks, were from Chachma de Klipa, right? So they had access to the highest level of Chachma of Klipa, Chachma Chitzanias. In that time, they were the philosophers. They were, very, very learned and very, very up there, like, learning. And they were great philosophers. I mean, to this day, a lot of those philosophers are, well known. So they, because they had this access to the Chachma Chitzanias, they therefore tamu kol hashmanim, which means they made tameh. They defiled all the oil, which represents the Chachma of Torah. So they came from the Chachma of Klipa, Chachma Chitzanias, like the highest, up there, and they came to the Beis Hamikdash and defiled the oil, which represented the Chachma of Torah. Which obviously means, which represented the idea that they wanted them to lashkicham tarasecha, because they wanted the Bnei Yisrael to forget the Torah. They did this in the physical manifestation of defiling the oil. Matzinu ma'ala michadis b'lashon yavan. Okay, so we're going to look at the word yavan. Sha'af b'svarim tar nevim ksuvim lehitiru sheyichtavu b'lashon acher chutz milashon ela yavanis. So in Torah Nevi'im Ksuvim, there's never the mention of Yavan. It's only mentioned Yavanis. Yud Vav Nun Yud Saf. Amar Kra Yaft Elikim Liyafes V'Yishkain Ba'alei Sham. Yaf Yasei Shal Yefes Lashon Yavan Lashon Yafa Mashal Kol B'nei Yefes. Yehei Ba'alei Sham V'ad Shebaktu Umatzinu She'ena Tar Yachela Lehisragim Kol Tzarcha Ela Yavanis. Nishtana Lashon Yavani Mishar HaLashonos Lefi Shehaya Muvan Etzel Chachmei Yisrael Mipnei Shehem Pirsho Hatar B'Lashon Yavan Latamai Hamelech V'nis Parsma Etzlam Isai Hataka Ad Shahaisa Etzlam Isa Helashin Kamela Shaina Ki'ilu Haisa Ashuris. Yeah, so Yavan is never, okay, there's just one little part that I don't understand. But basically the idea that Yavan is never, it's either referred to as Yavanis or Yafes or Yafa. And I'm not sure how this connects, but hopefully we'll get some clarity here about the idea that Talmai wanted to translate the Torah into into Yavan, the language of Yavan, into Greek. And he publicized it, I think. I'm not exactly sure what that means, honestly. But if anyone
Shehem Pershu HaTorah, I think they
translated.
They interpreted it. It like they commented on the Torah in the language of Yavan for this king, and then it was publicized, right? It was made like famous. That copy until it was at some also halashon k'moy lishoinam ukilai sa ashuris some oito halashon k'moy lishoinam until that language became that language as if Ashurit. Perush HaMishnai Rambam. Well, they basically translated the Torah, right? They translated it in the Lashon Yavanis, like, so that it could be like understood by them. It should be like in their language, like in their culture, like that. That's what I'm understanding.
Right. I guess my question is, what does Ashuris mean? As in, like, I don't know. Okay, so basically they translated it into a way, they perfected it, they perfected the translation until it was the right translation, and then they translated it and they and they publicized it. Thank you, Samchachaya. Vasbar Bazeh. שמצד המעלה דהמשכת והסגלת התורה למטה גם בלשונס דאומס העולם באר היטב בשבעים לשון. התרגם ליוונס כשלעצמה הוא עניין טוב, רק שכספו לתלמי המלך, אז התורה יוונס היה היום קשה לישראל, כיוון שנעשה בהעגל. כיוון... Okay, so the idea, from the perspective,
there's a little paragraph that you skipped before.
Yeah.
Is it? Did you skip?
No, it was not on purpose.
On purpose, or you want, or maybe? Oh,
thank
okay.
You.
So just to.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sure.
Okay, yeah. So basically, the day that Talmai wrote the Torah in Yavanis, in the Greek language, was Hayam Kashal Yisrael K'mashinasa by Egel. This was a terrible day. It was just like as terrible as the day that they made the Egel, right? Which means it's the exact. The Chet Egel was the opposite of the point of Matan Torah, and this here was also the opposite of the point of Matan Torah. So what's right? But at the same time, the fact that the Torah is revealed and manifested in a different language means that it's more revealed in a lower point, right? In a different language. If it's translated into more languages, that means that it's more revealed. That means that it's more manifested in more parts of the world. So in and of itself, it's a good thing. But the Talmai HaMelech version of the translation of the Torah was as bad as the day that the Egel was made. Why? It was so terrible because it didn't come from Hashem. It came from a desire, or not from drishas, from the word of the king Talmai. So because it came from Talmai, who was a not Jewish king, it's possible that something really terrible can come out of this, that is either something not great, or something even to the point where something that is completely opposite the whole idea of the Torah. It's interesting because I just want to add to this that I read, I think it was in something that the Friedrich Rebbe wrote. I think it was Sefer Seiches, where he talks about how much excitement one of the previous Rebbeim had to see Chassidus written in Yiddish. It brought him so much joy because and I would love to look it up and tell you exactly which rabbi it was that was so happy to see chassidus written in Yiddish, because this is taking something that's so holy, a piece of Torah, and putting it into a different language is making it manifested into the next such an incredible level. So there is something very important, and there's something very noble and holy about translating, and there's something very about that these words are being manifested in a different way, in a different culture, and that's incredible. But it came from this king, which was not a good thing. Yeshleimer Shet. So also, there's a pretty good chance, the Rebbe says V'yesh-lemer, the Rebbe is not saying it specifically for sure, but we can take that as a for sure, because the Rebbe said it in this way. The outcome of this translation came the gezerah of the Yevanim Mashgiachim Torah, because Torah Hashem, they wanted the Torah of Hashem to be removed because they had access to the Torah. Shebe'inyan haTorah hu chachma gedayla v'seichel nifla lezeh hiskimu gam haYevanim. The Yevanim 100% agreed and understood and appreciated the fact that the Torah is such an incredible light and such an unbelievable work of knowledge and wonder and all that. That's 100%. And the big philosophers and the big what are they called, professors or whatever you want to call them, scholars of the Yevanim were so like blown away and excited from the depth and the greatness that is in the chachma of the laws of the Torah of Alshe Tisnagdu al Zashe Torah. So they 100% agreed, and they were so inspired and they were so blown away by the greatness of the Torah, but they didn't want it to be Torah Savayat, Torah of Hashem. Hainu l'kedushas the Torah shahaya chachmasei isbarach neged zel chachmasei, because the holiness of the Torah would go against. Sorry. So basically, right, the idea is that they were happy with like the here in the footnote, they were okay with Shabbos and Pesach and all like the cultural pieces of the Torah, but the chukim, right, like shatnez and paraduma and all those things, that they were totally against, because it was that was deeply connected to Hashem. Shenitzlu hatargam shel haTorah liYevanes lamed al gaidel etzem anaflas chachmat haTorah chachmat gdel v'seichel nifla al manas l'tam echasajal masakdusha sheba chachmat haTorah shalei yanikar shehi chachmasei shel Kadosh Baruch Hu ki im chachma anushas ke ha-philosophers the chachmas yavan shezehu inyan timu kol hashmanim shebehechal. So because the Yevanim had access to the greatness of the Torah, which means that they understood it, so they knew how great it was. They understood, they appreciated the greatness of how great the Torah was, and therefore they were able to be metame, to bring such tumah to the kedusha of the Torah, that they were able to bring it to so this is the idea of they defiled the holiness of the Torah as well as defiling the holiness of the oil. Okay. This is a long ice, but I'm gonna try to do it anyway. V'taychen haneis Chanukah hu b'inyan shemesh tar. Shemen. Do we have any questions for, by the way? Okay. V'taychen haneis Chanukah hu b'inyan shemen tar matzu pach echad shel shemen shehaya mainach בחוסמי של כהן גדול, לא היה בי להדליק אלא יום אחד, נעשה בי נס להדליקו ממנו 8 ימים. So what was the Ness of Chanukah? That they found one small shemen tahar. They found one tiny pach, one tiny flask of oil that was still sealed with the Kohen Gadol, and they were able to light it. It was only enough oil to light for one night and for one day. And Hashem made a great nace, and they were able to light this menorah with this oil for 8 days. Kazayas Kevan Shigazar Sayvanam Hasel Shifim Tar Secha Shartul Tamachas Shamasik Shabachma Hatar Hutzrach Liyas Hanes Ba Hadgashas Hakadusha Shabachma Tar Shahitar Site Shalkash Brechotar Secha Aideza Shematsu Sheman Tahar Ella Timuhu Hayvanim Visermiza Shematsu Pach Echad Shel Sheman Shahaya Mainach Bachachmas Shel Kain Gadol. Oh, so the the whole idea, this whole gezerah was to make tameh everything that's within the Torah, right? And right, so basically keep the Torah but remove its holiness, remove the Hashem, remove its purity, remove the tahar, the purity, the sacredness of the shemen, and the fact that they found something that had the seal of the Kohen Gadol was very, very, very important. This was something that was such a high level that even the Yevanim weren't able to touch that little flask of oil that they found. Even the Yevanim had no way to connect to that. Vanasa by Nes Vedluk Yumenu Shmaniyam Shivas Shivyam Nosafim Alayam Echad Yam Echad Shaya by Lahad like Ha Kailam Shivas Yumay Shavua Klaus is mine. So basically the fact that the Yevanim had no access to this holiness, that was a very important piece, and that's where the miracle came from. The untouched, pure, sacred flask, that is where the miracle came from. Binyan zeh shemen tar mudgash b'limud nistar d'Torah ki b'limud nigla d'Torah kivan she'aseh ku binyan ha'olam sheba hem dinim halachas yachol liyes matzav shem makirim ba'etzem haflas hachachma she chachma gdel of sechon nifla mibli lahakir lahargesh shezuhu chachma seshal kash berko va'etzel lezeh shalimud nigla d'Torah yeh b'yichad im limud nistar d'Torah. Yidei Selakas, Taslaka, Vehashai, Deza Nasa, Gamli, Nigla, Hadar, Bekdusha, Satar, Nicker, Shaneker, Minerga, Shazo, Chachmas, Shalkas, Racha. So the idea of a pure flask of oil, we hold it, we talk about the oil that they found, and then we talk about what it means, how it represents the nister of Torah. Right, the hidden parts of Torah, because when you learn, like, it's possible to learn Nigla without understanding, without appreciating the fact that it's Chachma Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. So how can you remedy this? By learning Ligna. So when you learn Nigla and Nistra at the same time, when you learn Chassidus, when you learn the depth of the Torah and learn who Hashem is, then that'll bring elevated understanding and appreciation, and bring it basically to your heart that it is the most holy, sacred thing, and that this Torah is Chachma of Hashem. Okay, so that's, I think we're going to end off with that. If anybody has any closing remarks, or we can still talk about your. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I would love to continue.
Yeah, we hear you.
But yeah, I'd love to continue, but I want to keep to our schedule of keeping this to an hour. So I will do that. And maybe I am open. Yeah. So let me open it up to questions or comments or talking about your.
The sicha, it's like, okay, so the oil, the lights, but you're saying something which I have a lot of identification. I think my neshama has something to do with like gevura, because I love discipline, I love structure, because I feel that's what contains the light. If there's so much light and there's no container, it's just all over. So it's the same thing with the oil, like, to spice it right and to use it in the right proportion and in the right way. And the fire can't be too high, can't be too low. It's like everything that you're going to mix, like the whole context, right? I think you mentioned that a few weeks ago. You were talking about context, like where you put that oil. So where you put that light, how you're going to bring that. Also, I feel, I don't know, this is what's coming up for me. I feel like also Hasidus is, oh gosh, I don't know how to say this, but it really could be used. It really needs to be, let's say in the positive, it needs to be used in the right way, in the right context, in the right proportion, in the right intention. Because even with Hasidus, a person can use Hasidus and, it could be defiled. I don't know if I could say that, but
no,
maybe that's what the Rebbe is saying. Like,
yeah, very clearly.
Ein
shaisa I say. I'm just going to read this here. Ein shaisa I say betor mashka b'fnei atzmai v'adar b'shem b'fnei atzmai mazik la'adam.
Mazik.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mazik is like damages.
It could take him out of his kalim. It could take the person, right. It could take the person like in a state that is not, like, this is something that I learned many years ago, that when we want to know how we're doing spiritually in our lives, like how we're doing, we need to ask the people around us, like family, because the family are people that live with us and that are constantly with us. And if we're smiling at them, if we have time to look at them, if we're present for them, then they're the best people to ask. And why am I saying this? This is something I learned in a course also. I took a course, whatever, on elegance and femininity and all that. And she says one of the things, like confidence and blah, 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 whatever. So she says one of the things to do is to take a survey, to ask people that know you what they think about you. So it was so interesting. I did it and I asked people to say what they think. So of course people said nice things, but then they also said things that I wasn't aware of. And it was so eye-opening that people, like, it's so important, and you need to have courage for it. But people were like my daughter, she said something, she's like, oh, you this, you that, and then she said something, and it was like, yeah, like I was so spiritual and very, beautiful and helping the whole world. But then if, sometimes the way they speak to their family members or the way that they are home, what is, I mean, it's even hard to say this, but like Hasidus has to be in the pure form. And like you said, like in moderation, intentional, like in the right kalim.
So all of that you feel like that's what it means, that it has to be mixed with something else? It has to be mixed with like gevura?
Not necessarily gevura. No, so not necessarily gevura.
What is the Rebbe
mean
when he says that the oil has to be mixed with something else? What is it mixed with?
So it either has to be mixed with
halacha.
Either with halacha or with even this example of like here, the story. Like it has to be in the context. Like you can't just learn Hasidus without learning like a piece of Torah, like a story or a Gemara or whatever. Everything in Hasidus is based on like that's a simple thing. Every Dibur HaMaschil comes from Tanakh, or maybe even not Tanakh, then Gemara for sure. It's all based on all the references, all the, like, you know, okay, there are obviously the Zohar is just like, if you look at like the references of Hasidus, like most of it is Nigla, and then there are some, like, let's say Zohar things thrown in, but that's only to support what you're saying. It's not a source in that same way. Does that make sense?
I'm not still getting, why is it so crucial to mix it with that? Like, for example, if say you're teaching a beginner Hasidus, why can't you just share the deep idea? Like, why is it so crucial to connect it with the pshat?
It's a great question.
Like the Rebbe says that why?
Yeah, so you know,
right?
that is something that. Oh, say you go ahead, Khani. I thought you were.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm gonna mute myself.
I don't know. I think for myself, I think that what's coming up also is that Nigla and Nistar Torah and Hasidus are one, not separate things. It's like the mashal of, you know, it's a nishmata deoraisa. It's the soul of the Torah, so it can't be disconnected. It's Torah's chaim, so it's alive. So it needs the neshama and the guf. It needs to be together. And just like us, like we're alive when the neshama and the guf are together and in total harmony and integration. So Torah Nigla and Torah Hasidus, like coming together. I mean, how many people